Hi guys, and welcome back to the ongoing saga that is my EV conversion. And what you're looking at here is a collar which I ordered for the spline shaft on the gearbox. And the reason I'm using that is to maintain the coupler in the correct position. This shaft is a little bit longer than I need. So I need something to keep this coupler in just exactly the right position. So now that I've got this fitted, hopefully that will go on there. The motor will go on there, and we'll get the whole thing bolted up. What I plan to do is to give this a good clean out inside, get rid of all the dust and debris from all of the messing about I've been doing. Give the whole thing a real good clean. When I was fitting this shaft collar, I used some red Loctite on the bolt, so hopefully that will never ever come loose. When this is on and the motor is in position, this can move up and down, or as it would be in the car, forwards and backwards by approximately 2 mil, something like that. Just enough that it's not too tight, and it won't be putting any strain on any of the bearings, and not too loose that it'll be rattling about. So hopefully that's about right. Anyway, I've got a wee bit of footage of it actually spinning, taken from this hole. As you can see, it's not a very big hole, so the footage isn't very good. It's the best you could get with the camcorder and a torch. But anyway, I'll show you that now. So that was this thing spinning with the IRD and everything all bolted on, all sitting in position. And everything seems to be going just about right. It's hard to say, of course. Haven't got it spinning up to the full speed or anything yet, but this has never been about perfection. Any of this is not about perfection. I'm not able to get perfection. I don't have that. I don't have the facilities. I don't have any of the expertise or the skills. I'm just doing the best I can. And so anyway, that's the coupler pretty well finished. There's not a whole lot more for me to do here. So like I say, get the whole thing cleaned up, get them bolted together, and get them in the car. Right guys, well, I have this all torqued up and tightened up and everything seems to be okay. The motor is spinning fine, everything seems to be working as it should. But there's one thing which, excuse me, I kick a bucket. There's one thing which I hadn't actually taken into account, and that is the IRD, which is this beast here. Sends the drive out that direction to the rear prop shaft and the rear wheels, and on the car, when it was bolted up to the engine, it was secured at this end of the IRD using a bracket which bolted directly to the engine. Now I don't have the luxury of the engine on the end of this anymore, so any bracketry that was there before will have to be replaced with something different. So what I'm thinking of doing is, I've got 4 mounting points here, and I have a motor mount here. As you can see, I've roughed out a CAD template, which what I did was I took off the bracket, the mounting bracket, put the bolts back in, here, and these bolts here, and had them raised up, put a piece of cardboard on top, and then took a hammer and just tapped on the top of each of the bolts, and that got me the marks where the bolts are. It meant that I could then use them as a guide to get everything nice and square and in position. And then just went round and carefully cut out as best I could, and then whenever that's done, I'll probably transfer to this, which, as you can see, is a piece of heavy steel plate, approximately 5mm, and that should be well strong enough to hold this whole thing together. There's going to have to be some kind of spacers. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do it just yet. I may have to bend the steel down to go from one level to the other. But this is just a very rough template, just to allow me to get this, just to get the basics of this right. Alright, well, this bracket is starting to take shape. As you can see, we have, it's basically following the contours around this engine mount, and then what I've done is I have made a piece of cardboard here, which is coming up and twisting. Coming up and twisting, and I put a weld across here to weld the two together. I don't think I'll be able to do this in one piece. There's no reason why it should be a problem welding it. Right, so I have it stuck down with double-sided sticky tape. So just trace around everything and then start cutting it out. Well, as you can see, I have this part of the bracket roughly to shape. Very roughly, it still needs to be tidied up a bit. Trimmed a few places and cut the shape and so on, but just roughed out. So I'm going to go on to the bigger part of the bracket. When I get this cut out and fitting nicely in this position, I'll then finish bringing this up to match it. Until I have this completely finished and fitted properly, I'll not really know exactly what shape to make this anyway. If you're wondering how I managed to twist this 5mm steel like this, I shall show you. Okay, what I did was I used these plumber's wrenches, can't remember what you call them, put them on the end like so when I wanted it to bend. I then took this beast of a thing, which I made a few years ago. That was just the boss distracting me. Put them over strips like so, and used the leverage from this long bar to achieve the bends. That was originally made a long time ago to, if I remember right, remove the flywheel nut from an RX-8, from a Wankel rotary engine. That's what that was made for, and it gets used for all sorts now. So that's how I managed to twist this to the shape where it is, and if I need to twist it more, that's how I'll do it. Right guys, well, as you can see, after an hour or so of cutting and grinding and swearing, quite a lot of that, it's coming together. Needs a little bit more off here just to get it to fit into that. I decided not to try and follow the contours too closely for this. After doing this one, it didn't appeal. I'll probably do something similar to this, try and cut it just in straight lines as much as possible. But I do want to try and keep the integrity of the steel, which is why I'm not just going to go straight across there and across there, because if I did that I would lose this bolt hole. Well, as you can see, we're starting to get somewhere. I've got it pretty well fitted around this. It seems to be coming right down. It's going around this, no problem. So now I just have to get this one done. This is just a slow process of grinding and cutting and grinding and just keeping on going. So get this one done next, and then we'll have to see about putting a bend in it, because that I think will be sitting like that, something like that. Okay, well, as you can see, I have a couple of bits of all thread just cut down to size, just to hold the bracket, this engine mount or motor mount in place, and this is how it fits. There you go, that's not too bad, all nice and secure. The only thing is, like I said earlier, yes, there's a bit of a high spot here in the middle, so I'll have to bend it around that. So as you can see, guys, I've managed to put a bend in it just to get it over that high spot, but of course in putting the bend in it, it's now too tight at this point, so I'm going to have to take it and grind that back again. If you're wondering how I put the bend in it, I did it using this on my vise. This is a homemade whatever you call it thing that I made a few years ago. It clamps nicely on the vise and it just works like that. So that's how I put the bend in it. Lots of stick it in that, tighten the vise, put it in that, all the wrong shape, put it in that, tighten the vise, put it in that, all the wrong shape, put it in the floor, jump on it, put it back on that. Lots of all that going on, but now I need to slacken it off just a little, just take off a few more mil here, just to give it a bit of space to fit properly. Okay, well, after a lot of bashing and fiddling and thumping and whatever, we have finally got it to the point where I am happy to go ahead and start marking the holes, so I can bolt this down. And once I have this bolted down, I will then start and bring up the side part of the bracket. By the way, grinding and cutting with a grinder, that produces sparks, and sparks are hot. And I'll tell you how I know sparks are hot, because if you look in there, just there, yeah. I couldn't understand why I was getting nice and warm and toasty in here. I looked down and it was on fire. So yeah, that's my good overalls ruined and my good jumper ruined, and oh well. It's a pity I didn't have the camera running at that stage. I would have given you a good laugh. But yeah, that was a bit of ooh type moment. Anyway, this is good. Gonna go ahead with it now. Like I said, I took a bit more out from this side, and I took a bit more out from this side, and maybe put a wee bit more back into this side. We'll take it from there. Well, as you can see, guys, I have this pretty well buttoned up now. I'm not going to spend any more time on it. I've spent the entire day working on this bracket. As you can see, it's nice and flat here, fitting well around the motor mount. Rises up over this high spot and comes down again, and it's nice and flat on the spacer at the back of the IRD. Right, guys, well, I have a slight confession to make. in that I hadn't allowed for securing the lower tie arm, or the lower tie bar, which fits into this bracket. I hadn't allowed for attaching that to the IRD, and I'll explain what I mean by that. This is the lower tie arm. It basically goes in something like that. A bolt comes through from the other side to secure that there. Then this side secures to the subframe of the car, and the purpose of this is to stop the engine from rocking backwards and forwards. It's the engine in its standard form is being hung from two engine supports, so it's basically hanging there, and then this arm stops it from rocking backwards and forwards. So what I need to do now is to figure out a way that I can replicate or tie this bracket into the new bracket that I've just made. Now, the way this originally worked was that this heavy steel bracket was bolted to the block of the engine, and that probably provided the bulk of the strength, sort of securing the IRD to the engine. Now that is being replaced by this bracket, so I'm not too concerned about that. I can do away with that completely. But this bracket would have originally been bolted, this bolts would come to this direction to go into the sump of the engine, and that would have provided some degree of strength to stop the whole, for the forward backward motion. And at the moment it's only being held on with these two bolts, so that's not going to be sufficient. Even if I bolted this in and then bolted my bracket on top, that's not really strong enough. So I'll have to tie this or weld this to my current bracket. So it fits like that. So what I need to do is to figure out a way to stick this bracket to this bracket to make everything nice and strong. Noise alert! And there you have a bolt that you can put into a hole, and that will allow you to mark where the center of the hole is. So as you can see, that is now just sitting up very slightly, just enough that when I put this bracket on, with all the other bolts in situ, so they're holding the bracket in the correct position. Put that on. Make sure it's on correctly, and you can see, hopefully you can see there, it's just sitting up on top of that tip of that bolt. So a sharp top of the hammer, and that's the center of the hole marked. Okay, well, as you can see, after a little bit of fiddling, all the holes are drilled, everything is lining up nicely. If I put the torch on, you can see everything lining up very nicely, nice and flat and square. Right guys, so a lot of cutting and grinding and whatever later. This is what we've got. There we go. As you can see, this is the bracket that is used for the tie bar. I've welded that to this bracket, and I've got this little L bracket down here going down to pick up at the side. Probably overkill, but I thought it was worthwhile doing it. As you can see, we've gone a little bit further. I've now welded on a bracket here to support the lower tie arm. I was concerned that if there was a bit of force going backwards and forwards, which there would be with the engine or the motor starting and stopping, that it would push this part of the bracket and basically twist the whole thing and deform it. So hopefully that will be strong enough that it will prevent that from happening. It probably is overkill, but I'm just being a bit cautious. Okay guys, well, after way too many hours cutting, grinding, welding, grinding, welding, grinding, welding, you get the picture. The bracket is finally complete and ready to put on this, whatever way it goes, like that. So I'm going to get this bolted on now, and as soon as it's bolted on, I'm going to put that into that. Well, that's where it's going, folks. Just have to raise it up now and get it bolted in, and then start making the bracket to come from here, which is the driver's side or right hand side engine mount, and drop it down and underneath to catch this bracket here. Yeah, it needs to come this way a wee bit and that way a wee bit, but only a few millimeters, and probably level it up too. But that's it in its resting place. Whew. Okay guys, I think I have just discovered a problem, or rather two problems. The first is I'm not entirely convinced that that bracket, the one that was originally used for supporting the motor, is going to be strong enough. And the reason for that is it's not only supporting the motor, it's also supporting the IRD, this thing here. So that's not quite as heavy as the motor is, but it's certainly half as much again. So is that little bracket there going to be strong enough to support both those things? I'm not sure. But even more of an issue than that is that the whole thing's out of balance. Basically, I need this whole setup to be correctly balanced at this end. It's obviously correctly balanced at that end because that's where the original mounting points were, but at this end the balance is off. As you can see, the mounting bracket for the, if you can see it there, is this is the mounting bracket for the mounting support for the original engine, which came down here somewhere, and our support's over here, so we're off by approximately 10 centimeters, 100 mil, 6 inches, take your pick. So it looks like we may have to fabricate more than just something to go down to meet up with this motor mount, but we're going to have to fabricate another engine mount or another way of attaching to the motor. Now, thankfully, some idiot that I know manufactured a bracket which was way over over spec, far heavier than it needed to be, to just hold those two atoms together. So that being the case, I think we may have to grind back some of that lovely paint that I've put on there and hot glue on some sort of a bracket that will come up to meet this, and the two brackets then can work in conjunction to support this end of the motor. I don't think we'll get away with what we've got. Pretty sure. It's one thing hanging it off a crane and an engine hoist. It's quite a different thing driving along, bouncing on the road and whatever, and expecting it to survive. So I can't move that bracket because it's physically manufactured and bolted into this end of the motor. So I'll have to figure out a way of creating some sort of a mount over here and tying in with that. It needs to tie in with that because the motor mount for it then gives some form of shock absorption. So, I suppose it's shock absorbing in the original Freelander engine mount, so maybe that isn't so important. But anyway, we're going to have to figure out some way to do this. So basically tie that big metal bracket, what I made, to that bracket, what was already there, and then bring it up to meet the Freelander motor mount, engine mount. Fun and games. The bracketry continues. Oh goodness.